Okay, I'm absolutely perspiring here in the office. It's a Sunday the 11th of August 2024, and Ruth and I have been talking at lunchtime about a memory, and I thought, crumbs, I must try and tell you this before I forget, and before I put the air conditioning on because it makes a noise in here. But I'm sweltering at the moment. It's over 50 degrees centigrade outside. We've got a big thermometer stands in the garden, and it's beyond 50. And it's the stuff in it, in the tube, the kilometers, is hammering the top. 37 degrees in the shade. So we're going to have a go at this story. It's from New Bolingbroke in. It's not actually New Bolingbroke. It's from the Lincolnshire Standard. When I was 17, 1961. Right, sound doesn't sound too bad, so here we go. So 1961, I was working at the Lincolnshire Standard at Boston. I joined when I left the grammar school in 1960. I was an advertising space salesman, plus copywriter. I designed display adverts for clients in Boston. I had my part of the town, which was the West Street area and High Street. I had other clients as well, and but it was a time when businesses were sort of multifunctional, or staff were anyway. I'd just passed my driving test, and I was used by a lot of the different departments to drive one of the vans and do other things. So you can read some of these stories, like delivering newspapers and stuff like that. Well, this time it was later in the day. I can't remember the time of the year. Oh, it must have been springtime, because it was when I was coming home. It was thick fog. So it was either November or January, February. Now, the Lincolnshire Standard in Wide Bargate had several different departments. As you walked into the front office, there was the administrative department with Eddie Hazelwood, who was an ex-Lancaster bomber navigator, and his ladies, all lovely ladies, and one of which I'm still in contact with, Margaret, who lives in Sibsey. Margaret Allgood. Hello, Margaret. So behind there was the printing works. It's extensive, of course. It's before computers and things. Everything was done by hand, so all the type was set by hand, and the pages were moulded in lead in semicircular, and the paper was printed on an old 1936 Goss rotary print machine with ink and lead plates with all the pages on. Behind that was a general printing department run by a gentleman called Jack Fidling. They had some pretty up-to-date stuff there. They had web offset colour printing machines there that really state-of-the-art stuff. And so it was this particular day. Jack had come up to see my boss in the advertising department. I suppose it's about 4 o'clock or something. And he said, look, I've got a real problem. I've got this really good customer out at Ragby. And it was E.H. Thorne, the beehive people at Ragby, who'd got some print being completed, and it was important that they got it back to their premises that day. It was really, important, an important print order, and they were good customers. Subsequently, of course, I worked with Harry Thorne, who was a relative. Harry Thorne and his partner, Jim Fawcett, ran Fawcett and Thorne, or started Fawcett and Thorne, the independent tie dealers in Lincolnshire, and thereby hangs a very long tail. So right, I have been designated, I've been asked to take a van load of print to Ragby. And to get to Ragby then I would go, leave Boston north, down Horncastle Road, out to Frithville, New Bolingbroke, which was subsequently where I lived, Reesby, Horncastle, and then up the road to Lincoln and to Ragby. Almost to Lincoln. So I loaded up. It was quite a heavy load, actually. It was brochures and stuff like that. And we'd got the minivan. So that the other problem that Lincolnshire Standard was in 1971. And dread to think how long ago that is. There were only 2 vehicles. There was a very old Thames 500 weight, side valve 100E powered van, which is a very epic story of me driving that in this series. And there was this new minivan which we bought in 1959, or the boss had. Didn't no name on it, it was just a minivan, grey. And when, in probably 1960 they came out. Minis started in 59, you know, and then I think it's 1960. Could even be 61, it could even have been brand new, this minivan. I was always chastised for not treating the vehicles at the Lincolnshire Standard with due respect. See the other stories. So off I went in this minivan. Super nice journey, no problem. I got to Rugby before they closed, so I had to be pretty swift. So I was in Rugby just after 5 o'clock or thereabouts. It was, yes, it must have been winter time because it's getting dark, and I was heading home. Well, I wanted to get home. I lived in Boston, 1961. I wasn't married. No, I wasn't married. Where was I living? I was living at Hubbards Bridge at Swine's Head Bridge with my parents. That's 7 or 8 miles out of Boston, on the road to Sleaford, down the Boardsides, down the railway line and beside the Hobhole Drain. So I want to get home. So I put my foot down and I was zooming along, and as minivans, you know, they're fantastic things, you know. I don't think you even see them anymore now. But they were just like a mini car. You know, you just put your foot down and you turned the corner and it went round the corner. You know, amazing things. Roller skates on wheels, they call them. Yeah, roller skates on wheels. Well, this question that Ruth and I had today at lunchtime, we had lunch early, and we got it out on the terrace, which we'd only used once previously this year because it's either been too windy, too wet, or too hot. So we decided, the wind was coming from the northeast today, and it was blowing lots of seeds off the trees onto one of our other dining areas by the side of the fish pond. So we decided to use the terrace and eat in good time. Being a Sunday, then every Sunday we open a bottle of sparkling wine. Well, to other inhabitants of the world, it's like champagne. But here in the Loire Valley, you can't call it champagne because Champagne have their, you know, registered name in the Champagne region of France. So it's Loire sparkling wine, but it's method champenoise. It's made just the same way. And it tastes beautiful, full of fruit, flavour, colour, and less than half the price. I bought some last night, Friday night, from a very good friend at Lignières, and I paid €6. Bottle of sparkling wine, you know, champagne, €6. And it tastes, I can tell you, it's far fruitier than champagne. It was made at Lignières de Touraine by Thierry Bessard. Okay, he's due a mention because he is our original wine producer, the first wine producer we ever went to over 30 years ago. Before he got married, he was only a young lad then, he's now about to retire. So Thierry Bessard made this lovely wine. When we have a bottle every Sunday, if we feel like it, we have a bottle in the week as well, but Thierry's wife Natalie and Ruth decided that to keep you healthy, then you need to drink plenty of sparkling wine, and then as the bubbles get in your bloodstream, it helps to clear the cholesterol. So to clear the cholesterol in your arteries, you need plenty of Loire sparkling wine. And you heard it here. Right, we were talking, and she said to me, because we lived in New Bolingbroke for 14 years, 1970 to 1984, and all that time, there was no railway. It had gone beaching, close it all. It was the railway line. If you've ever heard of some people called Swann and Flanders, they were a musical type of singers. One of the chaps was handicapped, he had a wheelchair. Can't remember which one. But in the 1960s, they were very popular with their caustic, politically incorrect songs, and they wrote one about the railways and beaching and how we'd close the railway lines, and I don't think New Bolingbroke's actually mentioned, but a lot of the other stations on that line, I think Wildmoor's in it, because Wildmoor's a pretty good name, isn't it? It's a branch line that came from Woodhall Spa. Actually, Kirkstead Junction was on the main Boston to Lincoln railway line, which ran along the Rutland Bank all the way. You know, beautiful to take that trip all the way from Boston to Lincoln. We're diverting, but it's why not? And at Kirkstead Junction, there was a branch line. In fact, there was two. One went off to Skegness via New Bolingbroke and Wildmoor and all kinds of weird places like that, Eastville. And the other one went to Horncastle. And at Horncastle, I think it stopped at Horncastle Station Yard. You can also walk along that railway line. It's a wonderful country walk, Lincolnshire County Council country walk along the old railway line from Woodhall Spa to Horncastle. Right, we'll go back to New Bolingbroke in 1961, a long time before we lived there. And I was zooming, it's a 7 mile straight. I didn't tell you this, did I? But from Revesby, where a chap called Joseph Banks used to live, a very famous chap in the history of England, and his estate agent was a chap called John Parkinson, who was responsible for building New Bolingbroke. It's a new town. You can read more about this. So I was hurtling along this road. It's a 7 mile straight. It goes from Revesby up to Frithville, and it goes for 7 miles, and there's not a bend. It's absolutely straight. It's not a very good road. It's just a single track, you know. Two buses would have difficulty passing. But it's dead straight. It's a fen road, a bit bumpy. So I'd left Revesby. I knew I was going straight now. And I was belting along this road, and I'd come to the New Bolingbroke sign that said, you know, New Bolingbroke and welcomes careful drivers, or something like that. It was thick fog then, and it was dark. And it set me thinking. I thought, yeah, New Bolingbroke. Now, there's a railway line here, crosses the road, right angles. And in those days, they had cat's eyes in the road, you know. Now, cat's eyes were marvellous because in the thick fog, you could see these cat's eyes coming at you, you know, dong, dong, dong. And your headlights, either dip or full beam, you were watching these cat's eyes coming at you, probably driving in the middle of the road. And, of course, you knew then you were in the middle of the road because there were the cat's eyes. I think they've dug them up now. Don't have cat's eyes anymore. And that's progress, folks. No cat's eyes. Anyway, I was belting along the New Bolingbroke. I mean, minis would do about 75 miles an hour flat out. And I was pretty well flat out. And then it made me think, you know, right, railway line. Did I ought to take care? This is thick fog. What if the gates are closed? Yeah, right. And then all of a sudden, the cat's eyes stopped. And I thought, shit. What does that mean? It means there's something crossing the road. It means that the cat's eyes are stopped and there is an obstruction. You know, the road isn't clear anymore. So I put my foot on the brakes and I pressed as hard as I possibly could. Really, really hard. You know, I locked the wheels. Because it was a fairly new van, I mean, it didn't swerve about and the brakes were perfect. And as I stopped and just managed to stop the van just at the crossing gates, and they were closed. They were closed. And as I literally screeched to a halt, a dirty black steam loco chuffed over the crossing with his firebox open. I could see the fireman clearly stoking his engine with the fire reflected back on him in his shovel. And the driver was leaning out of his cab, gave me a thumbs up. And behind him was a load of wagons of some sort or other. It was a goods train. I thought, wow, that was a close shave. Yes, it's a good job I was being fairly attentive. Else I could have plastered myself like marmalade up against those crossing gates, and the minivan wouldn't have withstood that very much because the engine's in the front, you know, and there's no protection. A little bumper, the radiator's even at the side. I'd have had the engine in my lap. Yes. Anyway, I breathed a sigh of relief. I was able to calm down a bit and, you know, relax. I was only 17. So, you know, 17, you can take a lot of stress, can't you? And the gates opened and I poodled along back to Boston. I must admit, I did go a little bit more slowly. I wasn't going at maximum revs in top gear, only 4 gears. It was in those days when you, to start the minivan, you had a button on the floor beside your gear lever, and your starting button. You'd had ignition key. In front of you was a dial, just one dial in front of you, speedo, and a few little lights. An ignition key in the front of this little dashboard, and you put your hand down and press this button to start the engine. 4 gears, handbrake. There we are. So I got home, parked the vehicle up, and I think I was probably driving a scooter by that time. I passed my scooter test, obviously, a motorbike test, and I think I got a Lambretta scooter, so I beetled off home on my scooter. I think it's still fairly thick fog, but not a lot to say to anybody. You know, I don't think I've ever told anybody this story. I certainly didn't tell anybody at the Standard. I didn't tell them how close they were to losing one of their posh new vehicles, or the only posh new vehicle they got. My golly, Lionel Robbins would have had something to say about that. He carpeted me often enough about misuse of his vehicles. That would have been the end. So there we are, folks. I hope you enjoyed that story. If you did, then please think about giving us a like, and even subscribe to the channel. That'd be wonderful, wouldn't it? You can't listen to this story in Buzzsprout because I've never written it. This is the only time this story has ever seen the light of day. So I hope you enjoyed it. But on our website, there's all kinds of things to look at. There's a link here. There are books to download and you know, all sorts. So back to New Bolingbroke. We actually moved to New Bolingbroke 9 years later and spent 14 lovely years there. So thanks for being with us today, and until the next time, cheerio.